Hello and welcome to the Imprint Weekly Podcast. I'm John Kelly, Senior Editor of the Imprint, a daily news site covering child welfare and youth justice around the country. You can read all of our coverage at imprintnews.org or check us out on Facebook or Twitter at the Imprint News. You can also sign up on our homepage for our free weekly and monthly newsletters. And for professionals in child welfare and youth justice, subscribe to our Youth Services Insider section for a closer look at news on business policy and practice. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is also a member of the SafeCamp Audio Network. You can check out our show page and all of SafeCamp's other great podcasts at safecampaudio.org on the web or at SafeCampAudio on social media. On this week's episode, we talked to Don Wells, who is the Chief Empowerment Officer at Just in Time, which is a San Diego-based organization working to support and mentor older foster youth on their path to adulthood. Now, as we have discussed a few times on the podcast, President Trump signed an executive order on foster care at the end of 2025, which instructed his Department of Health and Human Services on some priorities for federal policy around improved data and evaluation, support for older foster youth, and inclusion of faith-based persons and organizations in the child welfare system. We recently published an op-ed from Wells, which I will include in the show notes for this episode, who felt that the president's order misses the mark on what is needed from the federal government to better support foster youth. So he joined me to talk further about his views on that, about what Just in Time does on the community level to help foster youth, and more. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Don Wells. All right, we are joined by Don Wells, Chief Empowerment Officer at Just in Time, which is a San Diego-based organization working to support and mentor older foster youth on their path to adulthood. Services for older youth is very much in the news on the national level. We had the executive order come out from President Trump and Melania Trump. We'll talk about that. Congress has held a couple of hearings on this. So I thought it would be good to bring in Don and kind of get a ground level view, right, of what people are doing in the trenches to work with young people. So Don, thanks for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Before we get started on anything serious, got to get these folks to know you a little bit. So I'm going to have you give me at least one of your favorites in the following categories. You can give me more if you want, but just got to give me at least one. Your favorite movie, TV show, book, sports team, or musical group. What do you got for the people, Don Wells?
Okay, I'm sort of old school. So my favorite movie, I watch it every year, is It's a Wonderful Life. I watched it when I was a kid. I watch it every year since then. And I've actually come to appreciate that it's about something that I wasn't really aware of until just recently, which is it's about a man who was doing good things, but he wasn't wholehearted. And it wasn't until the end of the movie that he really became wholehearted about his whole life. And that changed everything for him.
Excellent and timely recommendation. Although I think that
exactly
people will hear this right after Christmas probably, but it's still be about people's minds. So let's talk, before we get into anything else, I'd just like to kind of hear, like I said, a ground level sort of explanation of what you guys are up to with Just in Time. Now, you have an interesting kind of origin story into this. You were on my side of the fence, right? You were a mediator. And we're kind of there for the first meetings of just like getting this nonprofit launched, right?
Sure. So what happened was, if you remember back in the Columbine shootings, back when mass shootings were sort of
surprising,
more rare. Yeah. And so I was hearing all these stories about young men who were disconnected, disenchanted, didn't have good role models. So I said, okay, I worked for a television station. I was in charge of community affairs and marketing. And I said, let's start a campaign to recruit male mentors. And we want to get 1,000 male mentors recruited here in San Diego by Father's Day. So we got to like 900 and something. And since I was asking other people to do it, I did it myself. So I started mentoring a young man who was 9, and then his sister joined in who was 8. And within a few months, they happened to go into the foster care system. So that's why I first got exposed to what foster care was about. Their lawyer happened to be a woman named Jeanette Day. And 3 years into my relationship with her, while she had their case, she started Just in Time along with Diane Cox, who was a friend of hers. They invited me to that very first meeting for Just in Time to help them with marketing. So I was like their marketing person, helping them to get some awareness. After about 6 years, I quit my job at the TV station, started my own marketing consulting company. They thought, okay, you have more time now, so would you be on our board? So I joined the board. And within a few months, they said, we think we need an executive director. We're not asking you to do it, but could you just do it temporarily, part-time until we find somebody?
And what was the deal before that? It was sort of just a volunteer led. No,
completely volunteers, right? So it was mostly women. What happened was they went out to deliver gift baskets to young people during the Christmas time. So again, a holiday theme.
Okay.
And they delivered 25 gift baskets to these young people who were just emancipated from foster care, often had no bed, no furniture, nothing, just empty apartments they were in. And they said, this is not right. This is, people who are mothers look at that and say, this is not going to work. So they decided to start just in time. So that was in 2003, after the holiday season, where they brought together a bunch of volunteers and said, let's do something more than this. So they started doing things like making sure people got connected to some volunteers. If they had some sort of emergency that came up, they would help them with that. So it was sort of, we're going to provide some resources and hope they make a connection to a volunteer in the process. By the time I came on board in 2010, again, they asked me to do it temporarily. They never really looked for anybody. And so I was surprised after 6 months when I said, where are all the candidates? And they said, well, why don't you just keep doing it? So I did.
Right.
But another part of the story, and it's really going to speak to what I'm going to talk about later. The young woman that I was mentoring, who was 8 when I met her, when she was 11, I was still in her life. And she really liked the movie Shrek. So we were watching Shrek at my place for like the 13th time. And she turned to me in the middle of the movie and she said, why are you still here? As a curious question. And I thought, no young person should be asking that question, why an adult is still in their lives. So when I joined just in time as the executive director back then, I said, okay, we've been doing resources with the hope that they're going to get connected to a volunteer, a mentor, an adult. We need to flip that around. We're here to get them connected to somebody, because you can give people all the resources in the world. If they have a sense of being disconnected, they don't have a community, they don't have a sense of belonging, those resources are not going to actually get them anywhere. So then we became an organization that was focused on that. It's resources plus relationships are what lead to empowerment and long-term success. So I became the executive director back in 2010, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, that's a good long run in this space, man.
Yeah.
So I like when I ask people to, that are really working on the front lines of this work, to explain kind of what their organization does. I always find it helpful if you could take, like, I know no young person is the same that comes to you, right? Or their experience might be different, but just take me through. You could pick somebody that just comes to mind, or you can make up a fake person. But how does a young person come into your orbit at Just in Time, and take me through like a year of their experience with Just in Time? What are they getting? How do they interact with you guys? All that.
Okay, and I'm going to do one better than a year of their experience.
Okay.
So young people come to Just in Time. At first, it was referrals from other places, because our whole model was, if somebody else is already doing something, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the other thing. So, for example, people were getting money for college, but when they came to Just in Time to go through our College Bound program, they got laptops, printers, they got a coach. We asked them, what would make you drop out of school? Because the graduation rate for foster youth is very low. At that time, it was like 4%. Now it's gone up to 8% or something. So we said, okay, we're going to do all those things that you tell us would make you drop out, and make sure that we're focused on those resources. But again, one of the big things is that when you show up, you move into your dorm, there are volunteers that are there helping you to set up your dorm, so you don't feel like, while you're watching everybody else with their parents do it, you're thinking, I'm here by myself. How am I going to be doing this? These people have all the support. I don't even belong here. So volunteers, when they do College Bound, they promise that they will be there at the graduation when they graduate from college. So they're going to have a support system that they can count on. Then we do all kinds of things with transportation and housing support for people who are not in dorms. We do everything that will keep them focused on succeeding in school. So the result of that is that when they're feeling like they maybe not belong there, their volunteers checking in every week and asking them what's going on and giving them encouragement and telling them about their own experience and all those things. So what that leads to is a feeling that I'm not alone, that I have some reliable support, and that somebody believes in me. You'd be surprised by the number of young people who say to us, somebody believed in me and that made all the difference. They believed in me before I believed in myself. And it's building that confidence along with those reliable, responsive community resources that keep people through. And when I say going to one better, I'm going to tell you about a young woman who came to us when she was 18, and her goal was to buy a house in San Diego at some point, which is a big, hairy, audacious goal for anybody. So she got a coach for our financial fitness program, which starts off with what's your relationship with money, goes into opening a bank account, saving for a rainy day, and then we do match savings. And so she had a coach when she turned 32, starting with 18, she bought a house in San Diego. That same coach was with her that entire time.
Wow.
So going back to the original question, youth come to us with referrals from agencies who weren't providing what we provided. So they would say, go to Just in Time to get furniture for your new apartment or whatever. Then it became so many young people were with us that we had people just from word of mouth who were coming to us. And, there's a whole foster care community. And half of our staff, a little bit more than half of our staff, have lived experience in foster care. So they are telling people to come to us too. And it just becomes something that builds on itself because there's a whole community of support where when I started taking over, it was like 200 youth we served. Now, every year we serve about 3,600 youth. And a lot of that is just community connections. It's not necessarily getting some financial distribution. It's that they have some place to come to connect with other people. They get coaching from a volunteer on something they need expertise on. And we just had an event this weekend where we had somebody who we served in 2006, and she came to the event. And she has a son who's 17.
Yeah.
So that's a community. It's a lasting community.
I was gonna say, do you guys have a physical plant that for like the younger teens and 20 somethings that they're welcome to come to all the time? So that element.
That's a great question because we are not an agency. And we don't have clients.
Right.
We have participants in our community. So you're a participant. This is your community. It's not us, telling you here's what you need to do. In fact, we don't have programs. We talk about having resources and services. So 3 people walk into the door, they can end up doing 3 different things because it's based on what they are choosing to do, what they want to go after. And of course, if they're doing like employment, they might want to get a driver's license. So they do both our pathways to financial power and they do our changing lanes to get their driver's license. And then they might get their first apartment. So they do My First Home where we help them set up their first apartment. So, and everything they do, there's a relationship attached to it. So you might have 5 different coaches. And one coach might be a person that you love to go to a movie with. The other one is helping you get that first job. And this is what happens for anybody in a healthy community. When I was growing up, I had an uncle who helped me buy my first car because he was really good at doing that. I did not go to him for relationship advice because he was married and divorced from the same person 3 times. So here you're not just holding on to one person that could do one thing, and the volunteer doesn't have to meet all your needs because you have multiple volunteers. Plus you have staff members who you're connected to. And plus you have the other youth in our community that you get connected to. So it's a community of support that you can count on, that you can celebrate with. I remember one of our young people said that before he got to just in time, he was almost not wanting to succeed at things because he knew if he went to his college graduation, there'd be nobody there to cheer him on. So he dreaded it. But by the time he joined that community, that had completely gone away.
With a sort of structure so reliant on quality volunteers who are going to be in people's lives, what is your strategy? How do you guys go about ensuring that volunteer commitment at the front end? And how do you deal with it when inevitably a volunteer kind of fades away on a kid? Because I'm sure that happens every once in a while.
Yeah, and that's a great question too, because that's why we have multiple relationships. Because we know some people, they just move away. That's nothing to do with anything. They just don't, or they don't have that capacity to really have that long-term relationship. They're great at helping you get the job, but they're not there, to go to the movie with you, like I said before.
Right.
But if you have 5 different people that you're connected to, you have different people are doing different things, and it's not a like a rope you're hanging on to. It's a net where different people are doing different things in your life. Plus, those volunteers often connect those youth with other people in their orbit. So the whole thing grows so that it's even more reliable and responsive to the young people we serve.
Yeah. What need do the young people in your orbit say is paramount to them that you guys aren't in a position to provide? Like, what are you hearing from the young people that come in and participate that is like just a common thing you hear them saying they need that's just not attainable for an organization of your size or whatever?
Well, again, this is where collaboration comes in. For example, we don't do housing ourselves. We do rental assistance and all those kinds of things, but we don't provide housing, but we have partners who provide housing. And those partners who provide housing are not necessarily going to help them get a driver's license.
Right.
So it's a community collaboration. Altogether, we can do almost anything a young person would need.
Yeah.
But we have to work together.
I was kind of guessing it would be housing, especially in a place like San Diego where that.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Housing is difficult for everybody.
Yeah.
And so our population is often at the bottom of the list. So we have to be very creative, but there's an organization called Urban Street Angels. That's what they do. They provide emergency housing, transitional housing, and so we just this past week had a couple of people that we referred to them, and they referred a couple of people to us who needed things that they weren't doing. And in fact, we just put together in San Diego a collaborative, a massive collaborative that was funded by a couple of big funders here, and it's called United for Youth. And it has like 12 lead organizations and then 40 other collaborations. And it's just starting now, and we're going to have a common site that you could go to and get things from all those different organizations. Each one will have a resource navigator. So if you hit one and we say, well, we don't do that here just in time, we'll say, go to Urban Street Angels, you can get it from them.
Yeah.
So it makes sure nobody gets left behind, and nobody's just told, well, we don't do that. Here's a phone number, and hopefully it'll work out for you.
How do you go about evaluating the work of something that is so rooted in partnership and volunteering? I imagine there's people that'll hear this and say, man, that's a great conceptual thing. We should do that here or there. But how do you know it works? How have you been tracking it over all these years?
This is my favorite question. So when I first took over the job as executive director, which I'd never done before, never worked for a nonprofit. I'd been on a board a couple of times. So I said, okay, what do we need to do for us to really be successful and sustainable? And the thing that I focused on was this one person who said, if you can show that you can provide measurable impact, measurable positive impact, people will support you. So immediately we started measuring things. So we started measuring our big program at that point was College Bound. So we said we need to be able to track this. So we started measuring retention in college and then graduation in college. And now we can say that 75% of the youth who have gone through our program, and now it's like 1,000 over time, have graduated from college. And then we added postgraduate because that was so successful. And 100% of the youth we've supported in postgraduate work, 100% have graduated postgraduate. So that's value. And so we don't have donors, we have investors. We say people are investing in the future that they want to see. So if we say, here's the value we're creating, just like if we were a for-profit company, here's the value we have. Do you want to invest in this? And so most of our funding comes from individuals over the years who have invested in these outcomes. And we have, again, not only people who went through financial fitness, but we can tell people what's changed for youth who will say, when I first started, I had no idea about my relationship with money. Now I know I have a healthy relationship with it. I know how to make decisions around money now. I know how to save for my future. I have confidence that I'm going to have a stable financial future. So each one of the things we offer, we measure both short-term things and long-term, because our thing is that if we can show somebody has become confident, capable, and connected, we can pretty much predict that they will succeed in the future. And in fact, we did a survey back in 2020, right before the pandemic, where we asked our alumni who are over 27 questions about finances, housing, transportation, relationship, employment, and we got their take on where they were. And then we compared that with people who around the country who were in foster care, had emancipated, what those numbers were. And we compared it to the general population, and our numbers were at least close to, if not the same as, the general population. And the key question we asked was, do you believe you have broken the cycle of foster care? And 91% of the youth we surveyed said that they were confident they had done that.
Meaning that you were not expecting anybody, their children to enter foster care.
Right.
Yeah. Hard to beat that as a metric.
Are you a professional in the field of child welfare, juvenile justice, or other family and youth services? Subscribe today to Youth Services Insider, the Imprint's exclusive section on all the insider news you need to stay in the know. Funding opportunities, major federal and state policy shifts, interviews with key leaders in the field. It's all available only for our Youth Services Insider subscribers. Sign up for a monthly or yearly subscription today by visiting imprintnews.org/subscribe. Our podcast listeners get 10% off their subscription by entering the promo code podcast10. That's imprintnews.org/subscribe and get 10% off your subscription by entering the promo code podcast10 today.
So one of the reasons that Don and I are talking today is because he submitted to the Imprint an op-ed after he had taken a look at the executive order on older foster youth that President Trump had signed at a big White House event back in November. I'm going to read to you just a quick line of Don's column for us, which you can also read on the Imprint. I'll drop a link to it in the show notes. Before I read it, I just want to say the executive order is a piece of a bigger kind of pie going on in Washington, D.C. right now, because some of the relevant committees on child welfare that have jurisdiction on financing with this issue have started to talk about, reauthorizing what's called the Chafee program, which is kind of their biggest contribution directly to serving older youth. So it is, I think a lot of people expect that in 2026, it might be one of the focal points of child welfare policy talks up there. But anyway, here's kind of Don's take on the executive order. The new executive order does not address the cliff of instability faced by these emerging adults, and the data on foster care alumni is stark evidence of the need for resources to break the generational cycle of foster care involvement, which Don was just referring to as kind of the guiding metric. When you heard that there was going to be this executive order on foster care and went in and read it, how did you feel about what you saw there and what were you expecting going in, just for general thoughts, expand on kind of what I just read to people there.
So I try to have a perspective where I want to always hope people have good intentions, and then they might have good intentions. They might not have a total perspective. When I first heard about this executive order, I was looking for things that would maybe move the needle in some way. I didn't see much in there. And alongside of what they were talking about with helping these youth, at the same time, there's all of these resources that have been demolished, cut, gotten rid of, that are the things that would actually be helpful, have been moving things in the right direction for, paying attention to that cliff that I referenced. So I didn't see anything in there that said the cliff was being acknowledged, and that we were going to give those resources that were necessary to make sure that was being addressed. In fact, the reality was that some of the things that would keep people from going over that cliff were being pulled back and canceled.
What are some of those things that you're referencing right now?
Well, it's everything from Medicaid to, food assistance. It just runs the gamut. It's almost everything that is substantial to help people not be in survival mode. What I ask people to think about when I go out and talk about what happens for youth who are aging out of the foster care system, I ask them, so do you have children? And they say, yes. Do you have children who turn 18? Yes. Would your children, after they turned 18, be able to go out into the world without any other help from you and be able to make things work and everything would be great and you'd be confident they'd be fine?
Nobody.
And nobody. and that's with all of the support you've given them up until 18. Right. They still couldn't do it. So why would we expect young people who were in foster care at 18 to be able to go out and do that? It's just unreasonable. It's not rational, and it's not our own experience. So why would we believe that? So to take things away from young people, and it's only been recently, like you said, with the Chafee grant, that was when things started to actually be put in place for young people who were aging out. When Just in Time first started back in 2003, there was almost nothing. It was a cliff. Like I said, here's some housing for you, no furniture. It was just not reasonable. So I just want people to recognize that every young person deserves the same chance that your children deserve. And if you look at it that way, that would be much more in line with setting policies and practices. This is something we came up with. It was Just in Time, which is that old saying about, give somebody a fish and they can eat for a day, teach them how to fish, and they can eat for a while longer. But if you make somebody part of a fishing village, even on the days they can't fish, they will be okay. So we want there to be a fishing village that we're all part of. It's not just individual people. It's not individual families. It's a community of support. That's where people thrive, in community. And I would ask you, if somebody said, John, would you rather be part of a healthcare system or a healthcare community?
Yes, community. Sounds better.
Education system or education community?
Yeah, of course.
No.
Yeah.
Community itself is not a word that we gravitate toward. Yeah. Because instinctively we know a community is not for me. A community exists for itself. The system is going to try to make me become what it needs me to be. A community I'm helping to create. That's why you're a participant at Just in Time. You're not coming into another system. You're coming into a community that you co-create, which creates also a sense of shared responsibility and the sense that we're all in this together and it's interdependent. Young people coming out of foster care are told that at 18, they're supposed to be able to do things on their own, which is ridiculous. Again, going back, your own children are not expected to do that. Why should they be expected? We are interdependent. And that's a big thing we have to do at Just in Time is sort of rewire that to you're here to get the support you need in order to get stronger and to grow. We're not expecting you to already be there. And this is a process of you getting to the place where you need to go. And you are a co-creator of your success. And we're here to help you with that.
Yeah. In your op-ed, you call out kind of three specific lanes, if you will, of support that you would love to see, the feds get serious about, Congress, the White House, whatever. And let's talk about them in a minute. The reason I wanted to bring them up is because, I think that for the majority of executive orders, I mean, every once in a while one comes along and the impact of it is enormous, but a lot of times they're not. And I think I would agree with you that particularly the section of this one that's about older foster youth is very tweaky. It's nibbling around the edges. I think there might be something to the idea of building some sort of national, well mapped out, app for people to know what they're entitled to. I think that would be a good thing, but it's a lot of tweaking. But we should see, like I was saying before, a discussion about, rethinking or changing Chafee this year, which really could have the potential to get things going differently. And the three things that you highlighted in your piece were affordable housing and healthcare. That was one. Educational equity and guaranteed mentorship.
Yes.
And I thought that was really interesting. So the first one of those is actually where, and I welcome your kind of thoughts the other way. I think that if I had to pick one aspect of those three where the federal government has stepped up in the last, let's call it 10, 15 years, it would be that first one. We, during Obamacare, extended Medicaid eligibility through 26. That's pretty significant. More recently, they've established the foster youth independent vouchers, which are, depending on the place and how seriously they're taking it, really supplying some meaningful support for self-sufficiency. I think that what do you mean when you say educational equity, and what do you think the federal government should be doing to bolster that for foster youth? That was a really interesting one for me.
So again, I think that for foster youth, their education rates have been, graduation rates have been abysmal for a long time. And let me just attack this from a different standpoint.
Yeah.
So the foster care system, well, we wrote a book at Just in Time. It's called Life-Changing Choices, and it talks about different ways of looking at things and how it then becomes the reality of what you're doing. So one of those things is about, and I sort of alluded to it, are you creating a system or a community? If you create a system, you do one thing. If you create a community, you're doing a whole different thing. And part of the foster care system has been around placement. So I'm being placed. So if I have, let's say, 12 placements during my high school years, that doesn't sound good.
No.
But if the goal of the person who is working with me is to place me, they've succeeded every time they place me. It's just now we need to get a different placement. If they just change that to, we'd like you to be connected. If I had 12 connections when I was in high school, that's good. But that's not the mind frame. The mind frame is a placement. One young person that we had said they should call it foster storage instead of foster care, because he felt like he had just gone from one storage to another storage until they were done with him at 18, and then he was released to go out and make things work for himself.
Yeah.
So the mental model has not been around connection. It's been around placements. And that's that allows you to keep moving people around when you know that that is disrupting their whole educational journey. And there's been research that's shown that too. And so then when you finally get out of grade school and then you go to college, and it's you're not likely to be able to succeed there either. Although again, we have shown that with the right support, people support, that can happen. So it's resources and relationships. It's not like really a complicated formula. People need the resources to be able to do it, and they need the relationships and the support to do it as well. So equity means you don't treat everybody equally because everybody is not in the same place. You have to do, some additional things to create equity, which means you have to do more and not be in like a Hunger Games type of thing where you go out there and we hope you make it, and if not, sorry, you just didn't try hard enough, I guess.
Yeah, right. I guess similar for guaranteed mentorship. I mean, that's a really interesting thing to think about, how the federal government's so removed from like the street where you are, right? Working with young people on the ground level could get involved, other than just to say, we're going to put money towards it. And I think that's the question, is like, as I looked at your list, maybe taking out affordable housing and healthcare, where I think they've got some things going. It's like, do we need to be thinking of passing this money down to organizations like you or counties in a way where they get to decide what mix of these things is right? I don't know. It just seems like it's very hard to DC is such a prescriptive place in terms of how they do this stuff, that I hear you describing sort of the magic of what you guys do. And it's like, I don't know how they could ever write that in it, unless they're just saying, we trust you to do right by the money and be a good steward,
So one of the chapters in that book, because here's some of the things.
Yeah.
Are you trying to protect people or empower people? That's one thing. Because if you're protecting people, and that's as much as you're doing, the best way to protect somebody would be to lock them in a room and then they'd be protected. But that doesn't empower them. If you think about your own journey as a child, your parents started out, you were down here at the bottom and they were up here at top. And then over time, you moved up. And then at some point that line crossed. And now you were up here doing more, they were doing less and less. So that's empowerment. Protection is you stay here the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Then you leave foster care. Now you're supposed to be up here.
Yeah.
And that does not work.
Yeah.
So
not the real world. This is not how the real world. Yeah.
So you have to empower people, and empower people also is giving them choice. So at some point, young people have to be able to start making choices while they're in foster care, to learn how to make choices. And all their choices are made for them. And then they leave foster care. Now they're supposed to be able to do that when they have no training and no experience in making choices. And so part of what I'm saying, another chapter is about who makes decisions. And we believe, and a lot of people believe this, the people closest to the problem should make the decision because they understand the problem better than the people who are miles away.
Yeah.
And we have, during the pandemic, we were serving young people 18 until they turned 27. That was our model. During the pandemic, we knew that some of our alumni who were over 27 were losing jobs and losing all kinds of things, just like everybody else, didn't have parents to move back into. So we extended our services to 27 to 35. We just decided. We didn't have to ask anybody's permission because since we don't have government funding, we could make our own decision about what we were doing. Nobody decided for us who we were going to serve. So we expanded because it was the right thing to do.
You take no government funding just in time?
We have 3% of our funding comes from the Board of Supervisors here in San Diego. That's it. Most of our funding comes from individuals, then some foundations, then some civic faith groups, some corporations. Government is less than the civic faith groups.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the Administration for Children and Families reached out and said, Don, we love what you're doing out there in San Diego. We want to give you $5 million to pilot this for the rest of the country and scale up. Would you take it? Or are you a little averse to the idea of what government money means?
Well, I would have to be convinced that you're just going to, here's what we're going to do, and now you're good.
Yeah.
And the reporting too. So they have to sort of make things all standardized just so they can make sure everything is being done the way they think it should be done, which then stifles innovation, stifles creativity, and they're not really going for impact. Like I said, confidence levels being raised. They're going for how many people were in this and did they do these things, which doesn't tell you much. And it's not a predictor of future success. So we do things that predict future success because we want things to change. We're not looking to maintain the status quo. We do want to break the cycle of foster care. We want people to raise their families and be empowered to do that. But that's a different mode than you have to follow all these rules and check off all these boxes. If you check off the right boxes. I mean, when I first came, there was this agency that was in the same space we were, and they hadn't spent all the money that they had been allocated from their granting from the government. So they were scrambling to spend the money at the end so that they wouldn't lose it.
Yeah.
It wasn't about how can we make this better for what we're trying to accomplish. It was, we need to just keep our funding. So, $5 million, my board would probably say I needed to consider it.
Hard number to pass up. So, the day that the executive order came out, and obviously that came straight from the president, there is a think tank called the America First Policy Institute that's kind of closely aligned with President Trump, and a lot of his former staffers run it and work on it, who put out this vision for reclaiming foster care, which is kind of an odd title to me, honestly.
That's the thing that I thought.
It really lays out, I mean, it's interesting. So the first 2 lines of the executive order basically say, we believe that kids are best kept with their families. But if they're not, here's what we want to do to change stuff. This thing could be looked at as here's what we want to do to keep more kids with their family. And I really appreciate Don took the time to kind of read through it, because I really was curious for your take on that. I'm always interested in, you guys serve these older youth who have a lot of times been in these systems for so long. Who knows? A lot of them have been in since they were adolescents or little kids. Some of them since they were teenagers. But you must hear so much from them, their reflections of maybe what could have been different early on. And I'm sure, just as a guy in this space, you think about the bigger system around you and what's going on the front end. So what did you think of, the ideas that are put out there, and what's important to you in terms of, how we change policy, if at all, around keeping families together?
So I'm going to go back to what I said at the very beginning, which is I always start with, I think people have good intentions. So that they're not trying to do anything nefarious. I was struck by the reclaiming foster care. So I'm not sure what point in history in foster care they're trying to reclaim. Is it like in the 1850s when the orphan trains were sending youth from out to the Midwest to work on farms? Is that the time they're talking about? So I'm not really sure what reclaiming foster care means. When has it been really a great thing that was working really well? No.
Yeah, it's a curious title. I can only think, having read it, what they were trying to say is we'd like to reclaim the purpose of foster care for a specific set of things that we've gone past. Like I don't know. I can't say that I would definitively say, well, that happened in 1972. That's the last time we were not confusing X, Y, or Z with dangerous situations and taking kids out of their home or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I have to think that's what they were trying to do. I don't know.
Well, the only thing I could come up with was that there was a point, right around when the Social Security Act happened, where foster care became more like professionalized as opposed to just a disparate group of things that were out there. But that happened because it wasn't good. It wasn't good at that point. It wasn't like suddenly now it became bad. And before that, everything was rosy. So anyway, that's just about the title. I guess the second thing is that it's clearly they believe that the government is like a bad actor in foster care. In the book, what they rewrote, we said, we start out with saying the foster care system is not broken. If it was broken, people would actually fix it. So the system isn't broken. It's the same system that was set up, like I said, back in the 1850s. Take children who are on the streets of New York, send them out to the Midwest, take them away from these broken families and send them out where the Midwest values are better. Now, what happened to those children, who knows? But that system is still the same system. The broken families, damaged children, give them to somebody else and it'll be better. So the system is not good for children. It should be more of a community model. So I agree with them on that. It should be more a community model. But I didn't see a lot about like an expansive community model. I saw a lot about, faith-based organizations being allowed to be included more and saying that the government is overreaching what they're doing. I think the government should help in providing resources. Going back to what I said at the very beginning, the government is not necessarily great at creating community. So communities being really funded in a substantial way by the government could be a good thing. Again, it depends on how much they listen to those communities in order to come up with how that funding is going to be used versus dictating it and trying to, for the sake of scale, make everything fit into these boxes that don't work for people. So I think that's really the issue, is that communities, and this goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning, John, young people need connection. They don't need another app. They need connections to other people. They need a community. They need a sense of belonging. What's disappearing from our society, to its detriment, I believe, is that we're supplementing connection with apps and community with an online something that's supposed to approximate community, and that's not the solution. It just is not. But again, it's the government has the funding. It needs to be applied by people who understand the problem. And I'm wondering how many former foster youth this organization talked to in coming up with their recommendations. This America First group. How many people helped them to put together this document who actually have been impacted by foster care?
I'll get you out of here on this question, Don. You've helped take this organization just in time from being I don't want to say ragtag, but it was a scrappy idea with some volunteers behind it into a thriving, multi-million-dollar organization. So what like, I know this is a cliche question, but it can be informative in this space. Like, where do you see just in time in 5 years? What would you like to see you guys doing 5 years from now that you aren't today? Where is the room for growth and what you can do?
So here's what we're doing. A couple of things. We're doing this big collaboration. We believe in collaboration, that creating an ecosystem. And we have two foundations here, the Lucky Duck Foundation and Previs Foundation, who incentivize that collaboration. And the Copley Foundation joined in as well. So collaborating more instead of it being, I'm going to use Hunger Games again, where we're all competing for the same resources, making the pie bigger and having people do what they do best. So that's a big thing we're doing. Another thing that we're looking at now, because as the foster care system is changing and less young people are going into foster care, they're doing kinship care, they're doing other things that are not taking the responsibility for the young people. We're looking at how can we serve what we're calling adjacent populations, people who would have been in foster care, but now they're just not being given that label. So they are going to live with their grandmother. Their grandmother is good because she's that reliable relationship, but she doesn't have the resources that she needs.
Right.
So how can we step in to help with that? And then the third thing that we already started doing is we have this model that we think really works well. And we're doing something called scaling by sharing. Since we're community-based, we couldn't go to Cincinnati and start our own community and have this work. So we're working with an organization in Cincinnati who is there and helping to share our model with them and helping them do the same thing. So they can skip some of the learning that we did over these last 20 years and they can get it done. So we're actively trying to do that with groups across the country. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to some sort of point where, I guess this goes back to your other question, we'll get to this point where we have enough people doing it, showing that it works in different places, where either we'll get funding from some foundation to support that, so they can give us the funds so we can do that for people who wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to do it themselves. Or maybe the government will say, hey, this works, so let's put our money toward this and we'll make it work with the right kind of foundation for we who are doing the work get to figure out how to spend the money.
John Wells, Chief Empowerment Officer at Just in Time. Thank you for joining us on the Imprint Weekly Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks to Don Wells, Chief Empowerment Officer at Just in Time, for joining us today. The Imprint Weekly Podcast is a production of the Safe Camp Audio Network, which is a division of Fostering Media Connections. Please visit safecampaudio.org on the web or at safecampaudio on all major social media. This podcast is produced and mixed by Christine Onjoko, with music by Luke Giroux and Cyrus Elia. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love it if you would consider subscribing or giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. And we would greatly appreciate if you would consider supporting our work here on the podcast and in print. Small donations from our listeners and readers go a long way towards helping us grow and cover more great stories in child welfare and youth justice. To support us, it is very easy. Just visit imprintnews.org/donate. You can follow The Imprint on Twitter and Facebook by searching the handle @TheImprintNews, and you can visit us on the web at imprintnews.org. You can always get us over email at tips@imprintnews.org. I'm John Kelly, and we'll see you next week.